Every Thanksgiving, my family treated me like the failure of the group, mocking my clothes, my car, and even my career. What they didn't know, I was secretly running a $330 million tech company. This year, I finally snapped. My assistant called on speaker, asking where to send my private jet. The room froze. I looked up and said, I guess I should explain a few things. What happened next flipped the entire power dynamic. Here's how I got revenge without raising my voice. I'm Sloan and I'm 31 years old. I have been quietly growing a $68 million tech company for 11 years while driving the finalized Toyota Corolla. Most people don't know, even my status-obsessed family. Our traditional Thanksgiving meal is tonight, and I'll put up with their critical remarks about my unremarkable appearance. I've always had the opinion that I should be surrounded by people who respect me for who I am, not how much money I make. However, the most fulfilling collisions occur when universes clash. I would like to know your point of view if you have ever had to cope with critical family members. For more stories on sticking to your principles when it counts most, please hit like and subscribe. I was raised in a lovely colonial-style house in a wealthy Boston suburb. From the outside, we had it all: holidays in Europe, country club memberships, and fancy cars. However, there was little warmth within those immaculately painted walls. Vivian and Graham, my parents, valued everything, including their children, according to its cost. Our dinner discussions, from my earliest recollections, had always focused on promotions, purchases, and which neighbor had recently improved their vacation house. When my father came home from work, he would hardly acknowledge me before telling me stories about closing deals. Organizing charity galas took up more of my mother's time than going to my school functions. Our family had a very clear definition of success: social status, prestigious connections, and obvious riches. When I learned to code, I was 12 years old. Mrs. Hartley, my math teacher, saw that I had a knack for reasoning and recommended that we start a computer club after school. Something clicked inside of me the first time I managed to get a basic program to function. In this world, appearances were less important than results. I became enamored. My parents encouraged me to pursue more appropriate pursuits, but by high school I was creating little apps for nearby companies. When my mother said technology is for the help, Sloan, she would wave it dismissively. Focus on debate club if you want to meet the right kind of boys. When it came time to apply to colleges, I was awarded a full scholarship to study computer science at MIT. My folks were appalled. My father stressed that Harvard Business School is the only acceptable option, threatening to stop providing assistance if I didn't follow through. Nevertheless, I decided on MIT and, armed only with my laptop and willpower, moved into a small dorm room. That dorm room was where I constructed the prototype for my business during my sophomore year. In the digital marketplace, I observed that tiny enterprises found it difficult to compete with corporate giants. By providing independent stores with the finalized technology benefits as large corporations, at a fraction of the price, my platform leveled the playing field. I was introduced to an angel investor by a professor who recognized the potential right away. In Boston, we started with 20 tiny firms. We had 500 clients throughout New England in just 6 months. We had obtained many funding rounds and were growing across the country by the time I graduated. Everything blew out during the Series B investment round. The company was valued at more than $100 million by a large venture capital firm. I was richer than my status-conscious family could have ever imagined because to my share, but I hardly informed anyone. It has nothing to do with lying. Having witnessed directly how wealth alters relationships, I deliberately chose to lead a modest lifestyle. I purchased a modest but cozy 3-bedroom home in a middle-class area. I continued to drive my trustworthy Corolla. I dressed well, but not in anything gaudy or designer. My goal in life was to surround myself with people who cared about me, not my wealth. The reality was only known to my assistant, Delaney, and a select group of close friends. Beginning as an intern and then becoming my right hand, Delaney had been with me from the beginning. Although she occasionally made fun of me for living like a normal person when I could afford so much more, she appreciated my choices and understood my ideals. I contemplated whether or not to go to my parents' house as I got ready for the yearly Thanksgiving dinner. It had been especially cruel last year. Since my business was clearly having trouble, Margot Elise had indicated that her husband could find me a position at his insurance company, and my cousin Chase had spent 20 minutes explaining his new Mercedes and asking probing questions about my little website thing. My folks had observed it all with that Miley's old mix of humiliation and disappointment. Delaney said, "You should have some clever responses ready this time during our conversation in the morning." Or better yet, just tell them the truth and watch their faces melt. As I went through my closet, I laughed. I'm not looking for a dramatic confrontation. I just want to get through dinner without feeling like I'm 16 again. I decided for a basic cashmere sweater, black trousers, and little to no jewelry. Nothing that would suggest riches, but professional enough to escape criticism for appearing like a college student. I gave myself the Miley's motivational speech I had been giving myself for years when I looked in the mirror. According to all relevant metrics, you are successful. You are not defined by their opinions. I still harbored the notion that my family would eventually look beyond financial achievement. Maybe they might notice my happiness, inquire about my love for developing technology that benefits others, or just accept me for who I am. Despite the unavoidable disappointment, it was this unyielding hope that kept me going to these events. There is no greater disparity between my friendships and my family relationships. I had established a team at work based on respect and common values. The majority of my staff were unaware that I was the business's owner. I worked with them and identified myself as a senior developer. I was nurtured by these genuine friendships in ways that my family was unable to provide. The Miley's trend has applied to my dating life. I had made the error of being upfront about my success early on, which had drawn a number of guys who were more interested in the value of my business than in my personality. I had discovered more sincere relationships since implementing my policy of prudence. I had recently started dating Miles, a science teacher at a high school who admired my spirit of entrepreneurship but was unaware of the extent of my accomplishment. We discussed thoughts rather than material belongings. And I had hoped for a relationship for the first time in years. I took a final look at myself in the mirror, picked up my keys, and made my way to the door. Instead, I climbed behind the wheel of my reliable Corolla, even though I could have called my driver and arrived at the business Tesla. Some realities could wait for another day, and some fights weren't worth waging. Right now, all I wanted was to survive Thanksgiving without losing my dignity. My gut was tense as soon as I turned onto my parents' street. With their well-kept lawns and expertly decorated holiday decor, each home was a tribute to wealth. With its round driveway and massive columns, my parents' colonial estate appeared to condemn me before I had ever arrived. I arrived behind a convoy of high-end cars, including my father's Jaguar, Margolinda's Mercedes SUV, and Chase's brand-new Porsche. Marcus, the family valet, came up to my car with the Miley's look he always had, a mix of sympathy and bewilderment at the outdated Toyota in this line of European engineering. As I left, he held the door open and said, "Good evening, Miss Sloan." "Hello, Marcus. How's college going for your daughter?" I gave him my keys and asked. It was clear that he was surprised to be recognized as a person rather than a service provider. "She's doing great. I appreciate you asking. Made last semester's dean's list." "That's fantastic. You mean computer science? When she graduates, tell her to email me her resume." I turned to face the massive front door as Marcus grinned for the first time truly. After mentally putting on my emotional armor, I waited a few seconds before pressing the doorbell. The door opened to see my mother, Vivian, beautifully attired in a high-end clothing that likely cost more than the average person's rent each month. She had a picture-perfect smile that stopped short of her eyes. She air-kissed me close to my cheeks and said, "Sloan, darling, you finally arrived. Everyone is here already." Even though I was exactly on time, there was a small accent on finally, which was common in our family. You were late if you were precisely on time. I entered the magnificent entryway, which featured a crystal chandelier and a tall ceiling. Graham, my father, looked up from Sterling William and nodded absently at me before they resumed their conversation about golf handicaps. When she saw me, Cousin Fallon pushed Chase. I pretended not to notice the gaze that was exchanged between them. Fallon, who is 34 years old, just became engaged to a hedge fund manager. This was her third engagement, but it was probably the first to end in marriage because of her fiancé's amazing bank account. "Is the sweater Sloan wore to Christmas 2 years ago the Miley's one?" Fallon's voice carried just enough for family members in the vicinity to hear her question. "Good memory," I smiled in response. "It is well made and comfortable." She emphasized the term as if it were a sickness, saying, "I guess that's economical." Margot Denise came over, looking at me from head to toe while holding a cocktail. "My sweetheart, you've gained a little weight, haven't you? However, it fits you. We were all worried because you looked so thin the last time." Margot Denise used this as an early means of asserting her power, even though I hadn't gained anything. "I appreciate your care. I've been more concerned with my health than my weight." She smiled thinly and said, "So sensible. How's your small computer company doing? Are you still afloat?" With purposeful ambiguity, I answered, "It's doing well, thank you." Sterling William came by with a pricey tumbler of scotch. "Sloan, I just told your dad about my friend's Google employee kid. Outstanding resume. Perhaps he might provide you with some guidance regarding what do you do?" I explained, "I run a technology platform that helps small businesses compete in the digital marketplace," knowing that, as innumerable times before, the explanation would be disregarded. "All right. Websites and the like." He dismissively nodded. In any case, this young man began earning $200,000 annually. Consider that. He went to Stanford, of course. "Where have you gone again?" "MIT, I answered. He remarked, "Ah, the technical school," as though I had gone to a nearby community college. When we entered the formal living room, I saw that I had been positioned between my mother's friend Patricia and cousin Chase, who had been attempting to pair me with her son for 3 straight holidays despite my obvious disinterest. "Sloan, are you still using that old vehicle?" As I sat down, Chase asked loudly. "I assumed such items would last no more than 5 years. It must be near death for yours." I sipped the water I had asked for rather than the wine. "Actually, it has been 12 years and is operating flawlessly. Toyota produces dependable automobiles." My mom chuckled uneasily. "Sloan is simply being realistic as she discovers who she is." Without lowering his voice, my father said from the other side of the room, "Not everyone is cut out for real business. Some individuals require additional time to discover their path." Even while I absorbed the pain of his words within, I kept my composure. I noticed my grandmother Ruth observing me with shrewd eyes from the corner. Eleanor Harper was the only family member who appeared to see past appearances, and she was 85 years old. She nodded slightly encouragingly. I excused myself to the restroom during a brief pause in the talk since I needed a quick break. When I was alone myself, I leaned back against the marble worktop and let out a slow breath. I took out my phone and sent Delaney a text. "The customary procession of subtle slights has started." She responded right away. "Remember that whole room may be yours to buy or sell. Their viewpoint is unimportant. If you require a staged emergency exit, give me a call." I straightened my shoulders, grinned at her encouragement, and went back to fighting. There was an air of old money elegance in the dining area. Set with the family's vintage china, sterling silver flatware, and hand-blown crystal glasses, the antique mahogany table extended beneath a crystal chandelier. Place cards were carefully placed for each guest in my mother's exquisite calligraphy. It should come as no surprise that I was sitting diagonally from Margot Denise and directly across from Chase, the family's most vocal critics. As soon as the caterer served the first course, the topic of acquisitions and achievements came up. The first 10 minutes were dominated by Cousin Bennett, who had just returned from Colorado. He pointed to his fork and said, "My real estate guy got the Aspen property for $3.8 million, but it was listed at $4.2 million. Ski-in/ski out access, 4,000 square feet, and heated marble floors in the master bathroom. You must all attend New Year's." A few family members answered suitably, and I concentrated on my soup. It wasn't the kind of achievement that garnered recognition at this table, even though I had just donated $2.5 million to construct a technology center in a Boston neighborhood that was underprivileged. Next up came Margot Linda, who described her appointment to the Boston Memorial Hospital Board. "Obviously, it takes up a lot of my time, but it's crucial to give back." It was not revealed that the post was primarily ceremonial and was acquired through her husband's connections. As usual, my father demanded attention by clearing his throat. "Vivian and I have made the decision to upgrade since we're exchanging news. A 60-foot yacht has been acquired for the upcoming summer. The Manhattan 65 Sunseeker. In May, she will be delivered." As the second dish was served, the personnel received appropriate applause. Then, of course, I became the center of attention. My father said, "Sloan, are you up to anything new?" Chase interrupted me before I could respond. "Do you still spend your free time coding? Creating those small items for websites?" I sipped my water slowly. "In actuality, we've grown a lot this year. More than 10,000 small businesses nationwide are being served by our platform, and did you hear about Fallon's engagement?" My accomplishment was essentially erased when my mother interrupted. Fallon threw her hand out and declared, "Kenneth proposed with a 3-carat diamond at Le Bernardin in New York." The light fell on the massive ring. Personalized Tiffany arrangement. Kenneth is aware that I am worthy of the best. Speaking about deserved things, Margot Denise turned to face me and grinned predatorily. "When are you going to find a nice man and settle down, Sloan?" she asked. 30 is drawing near rapidly. I clarified in a low voice, I'm actually 31. That's exactly what I meant, she added. The best ones are taken up very fast. A smart young lawyer, unmarried, from Harvard Law was just employed by Williams' firm. I could present you. I said, thank you, but I'm seeing someone. Oh. My mom became alert. Who is he? How does he spend his time? Miles is his name. He teaches science in high school. The ensuing hush was deafening. Looking into his wine glass, my father scowled. My mother and Margot Denise exchanged a barely disguised look of terror. At last, my mother responded, a teacher. How committed he was. With a false sense of brightness, Cousin Fallon said, teachers are so important. The assistant needs to be educated by someone. I put down my fork, feeling less hungry. Miles is a molecular biology PhD holder. He decided to become a teacher because he thinks science should be made available to the future generation. Noble, my father remarked sarcastically. However, a family cannot be raised on nobility. I suppressed the reaction that I could provide for 10 households without anyone noticing. I just said he's very good at what he does instead. I heard my mother talking to Margot Linda in the butler's pantry next door during the brief pause while the main course was being served. Their voices carried farther than they knew. My mother stated, Sloan is still in this stubborn phase. This computer hobby was a waste of all that potential. Graham is at the end of his rope. Have you attempted to present the Caldwell youngster to her? Margot Linda volunteered. She could get a real job at the investment firm from his father. Everything has been tried, my mother sighed. People asking her what she's doing with her life is embarrassing. I simply cannot comprehend where we went wrong. The talk was like a punch to the body. The abstract became brutally apparent when I heard them talk about me as if I were a problem that needed to be solved, even though I had always knew they were disappointed. Unbidden memories sprang to the surface as I sat there absorbing the new anguish. I had earned first place at the 7th grade science fair, but that Miley's evening, Chase's presentation of the soccer trophy overshadowed my accomplishment. My father had spent the party debating my major decision rather than congratulating me on my summa cum laude college graduation from MIT. My parents attended the launch of my first successful app out of duty, but they departed early to attend a cocktail party hosted by a neighbor. The trend was obvious. If my accomplishments didn't meet their limited notion of success, they would never be sufficient. Eleanor Harper sat next to me and could tell I was upset. They see what they want to see, dear, she muttered as she gave me a gentle smack on the hand beneath the table. I recognize you. Her simple gesture of kindness almost caused me to lose my cool. My 16-year-old cousin Tessa, who is still figuring out her position in the family, leaned over on my opposite side. Quietly, she remarked, I think what you do sounds really cool. I'm now enrolled in a coding course at school. That's fantastic, Tessa, I said with real pleasure. Give me a call if you ever want to discuss it or need assistance. In a sea of flimsy pretense, her countenance brightened at the offer, providing me with a brief moment of real connection. My attention was drawn to Sterling Henry, the family's seldom-seen black sheep who had decided to pursue a career in academics rather than the family investment company, and he raised his glass a little in a subdued gesture of support. These little intervals of genuine connection provided a welcome break from the generally suffocating environment. As the lunch went on, I started to wonder why I kept up the farce. I could conclude with a few phrases, disprove them all, and observe how their faces change. The temptation was strong, but I was hampered by something. They wouldn't be different if I told them about my achievement. It wouldn't change the decades of disregard, or make our relationship the sustaining connection I'd always desired. It would just change their response from one of contempt to one of exploitation, if anything. In addition, there was a principle involved. I felt that others should regard me for who I was, not what I had. Even if they were nasty, to abandon that idea would mean giving up something fundamental about who I am. So I sat, absorbing every sarcastic remark and contemptuous look, my determination growing stronger with each insult. Whatever the result, I would stay loyal to myself. With dramatic accuracy, the dessert course appeared. Each visitor was served beautiful plates of crème brûlée and chocolate soufflé. The amber liquid in the crystal dessert wine glasses was more expensive per bottle than the average person would spend on groceries in a week. In stark contrast to the discourse, the dining area was filled with the refined elegance created by the chandelier and thoughtfully arranged candles. Chase had drunk enough wine by now to forsake even the appearance of civility. Despite his attempt at a conspiratorial tone, his voice carried as he leaned across the table toward me. I've been wanting to ask Sloan, don't you become weary of being just another person? That sweater most likely came from a department store after all. Additionally, you continue to drive that college-era cheap automobile. I maintained a neutral expression. I enjoy my attire. Additionally, I get where I need to go in my automobile. But you want more, don't you? He pressed, making wide-ranging gestures throughout the lavish space. Those who are successful live like this. Not like, well, you understand. With a gentle clink, Margot Denise put down her dessert spoon. Speaking of success, Williams' company, Sloan, has a number of vacancies in their administrative division. It would be a steady job with benefits, nothing special. I would be delighted to add a word. Sensing shame, my mother interrupted right away. Sloan is still getting her bearings. I discreetly corrected her. She has that website business. App development platform. She went on without accepting the correction, saying, yes, that. It's simply taking a little longer than anticipated to acquire traction. Fallon rushed for the wine bottle, maybe feeling overwhelmed by the attention that was suddenly focused on me. Her arm moved strangely purposefully as she handed the bottle of wine to Chase, splashing my light-colored pullover with crimson wine. Exaggeratedly shocked, she cried, oh, I'm so clumsy. And what's that on your nice? A mix of cotton. Chase snickered behind his wine glass as I used my napkin to wipe at the expanding stain. In any case, perhaps it's time for a wardrobe update. However, I suppose some people only reach their full potential in high school. With the exception of Eleanor Harper and young Tessa, who was noticeably uneasy at the cruelty on exhibit, the table burst into laughter. Breathing became challenging due to the combined weight of the slights from the evening pressing against my chest. I resisted giving them the gratification of witnessing me cry, even though I could feel the familiar sting of tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. In that instant of bare vulnerability, I had to decide whether to keep taking their jabs in respectful quiet or not, or at last defend myself. As I pondered my answer, the tense stillness dragged on. Then my phone rang, as if by supernatural intervention. The uneasy silence was broken by the ringtone. I looked at Delaney on the television. I apologize, I said, getting up a little. I should check this, it might be important. Are you serious, Sloan? A dessert? My mom reprimanded me. After a quick choice, I clarified. The reception is spotty in here. I'll put it on speaker so that even if I move away, I can still hear it. I put the phone on the table and took the call before anyone could protest. Hello, Delaney. The dining room was filled with Delaney's clear, businesslike voice. I'm sorry to disturb your evening, Miss Sloan, but I wanted to make sure your private plane is filled and prepared for your appointment in Tokyo tomorrow. The contract documentation for the $50 million transaction are ready for your signature, and the executive team has been put together. There was instantaneous and complete stillness around the table. I maintained a neutral expression while Delaney went on. Additionally, TechVision's CEO personally contacted to inquire about your lunch last week. The Foundation Board has accepted your idea for the $15 million tech education center in the underprivileged districts, and he is keen to complete the collaboration we mentioned. Halfway to his mouth, my father's coffee cup froze. When no one joined her, my mother's apprehensive laugh vanished. With his wine glass hanging in midair, Chase's mouth hung wide a little. Delaney proceeded without incident, carrying out our emergency departure plan flawlessly. Finally, should the Tesla be delivered to your regular property, or your Nantucket vacation home, your chosen customization options are fully functional. I'm grateful, Delaney, I said coolly. Have it delivered at the main house, please. Additionally, inform the Tokyo team that I will be looking over the acquisition docs tonight. Of course, Miss Sloan. What else is there going to be? No, that's all for the time being. Thank you. After hanging up, I folded my hands in my lap and carefully put my phone back on the table. The next moment was so quiet that I could hear the grandfather clock in the corridor ticking away. Every expression on the table, from shock to incredulity to abrupt, uneasy calculation, was focused on me. I let the silence last a little while longer, relishing it. When I did speak, I did it in a cool, collected tone. I wiped the wine stain off my sweater one more time and put the napkin down, saying, I guess I should explain a few things. In reality, Nexus Technologies is the website business that I manage. I am the founder and CEO, and we are currently valued at slightly over $300 million. Confusion, incredulity, and finally a revelation caused a dramatic change in my father's expression. Nexus Technologies, the software firm that Forbes highlighted last month? I affirmed. The Mylees. After our next funding round, we anticipate reaching a valuation of $500 million. But you never said. My mother stumbled. Maybe for the first time in her adult life her social grace is slipping. I said calmly, I've explained to you exactly what I do at every family get-together for the last 8 years. You simply never paid attention. I looked across at Chase. Yes, I still drive that collegiate economy car, to answer your previous query. I could purchase a fleet of Porsches without realizing the cost, but I decide against it. The vehicle fulfills its function. I don't use my motivation to determine my value. Chase's former confidence vanished as his face turned red. I was only making jokes. You are aware of that. Were you? I inquired. When you informed everyone at my college graduation party that computer technology was only for those who couldn't manage real business, were you kidding around? I turned to Margot Denise before he could answer. I appreciate you offering me a job in administration at Sterling Williams Company. I currently have more than 200 employees, including 15 Harvard grads who came to me particularly because of our innovative culture. But thank you for keeping me in mind. Like a fish unexpectedly landing on land, her mouth expanded and closed but made no sound. Still calm, I turned to face my father. Dad, you haven't come to our offices once in the 8 years since I started my business. Your downtown meeting locations are 20 minutes away from them. Every significant launch and milestone has an invitation from me. You were too busy all the time. His face grew stern. I was unaware that it was a serious situation. You always played it down. I accurately described it, I clarified. You listened to what confirmed your assumptions. At last I turned to face my mom. When you asked me what I was doing with my life 4 months ago, I replied that we had recently closed a significant investment round. You brought up Fallon's membership in a country club instead. She muttered I didn't understand what that meant. I understand, I replied. That's the main idea. My dear, she objected. I'm not technical, you know that. I answered it wasn't a technical statement. It had to do with corporate accomplishment, the kind of success you would typically celebrate. Not when it comes from me, though. I spoke at a level tone and presented facts rather than charges. I looked around the table, observing the quick calculations taking place behind each set of eyes. I've never told lies about my identity or what I do. I haven't shown off my wealth since, in my experience, it alters how people view you. I desire genuine connections based on my identity rather than my possessions. With a sudden interest, my father leaned forward after regaining his composure. This is amazing news, Sloan. You ought to have informed us straight out. We could greatly increase the potential of your business using your business sense and our familial ties. I responded, our most recent product assists small businesses in competing against precisely the type of corporate consolidation in which your investment firm specializes. I don't think our business philosophies are compatible. We can talk about that, he said, dismissing it. In the end, what matters is that you have shown yourself to be a Nelson. We ought to discuss adding your business to the family portfolio. I gave a headshake. That will not take place. Nexus is still autonomous. With her social smile fully restored, my mother interrupted, we've always believed in you. I've expressed to my friends our pride in your spirit of entrepreneurship. Once the obvious attempt to change history could have been painful. All it did now was validate the wisdom of my decisions. I started this business without any family ties or help, I stated. Our success stems from developing technology that empowers people instead of taking advantage of them. Thousands of small enterprises have benefited from our assistance in competing in markets that were previously controlled by conglomerates. In areas that have been consistently shut out of the digital economy, our foundation offers tech education. Chase excitedly leaned forward. As you are aware, I have been working on my own company strategy. Revolutionary idea. I would love to present it to you at some point. Obtain the advice of your specialist. Margot Denise gave a hearty nod. What a brilliant plan, Sloan. Very wise to keep your success a secret. The relatives who had thrown me out just minutes before now tried to support my accomplishment one by one. If the abrupt change hadn't been so predicted, it would have been hilarious. I sipped my water and then turned back to the table. I don't share this information to make you feel better or to make our relationship better right away. But I would value honesty moving forward. Ask me about my decisions if you don't understand them instead of assuming anything. Engage with what I do, not what you believe I ought to be doing if you are interested in my work. Obviously, sweetheart, my mother said hastily. After all, we are family. I retorted, being family should mean acceptance and support. It should entail honoring each other's genuine journeys, not just those that align with preconceived ideas of success. Eleanor Harper's eyes were sparkling with silent pride as I turned to face her. Regardless of your opinions of my professional or financial standing, some of you have continuously showed me warmth and real interest. To me, that is everything. Eleanor Harper patted my hand as she reached across. Dear, I always knew you were unique. Admittedly, I was unaware of how unique it was. Tessa, young, smiled from her chair. There is nothing more awesome than this. Can I work for your company as an intern next summer? I smiled sincerely and said, we'll definitely talk about it. I'm open to building more authentic relationships with all of you, but it has to be based on mutual respect, I added, turning to face the adults. I will not pretend to be someone I am not in order to please other people. Furthermore, I refuse to judge my value or anyone else's value based on their belongings or status symbols. I didn't make bombastic statements or give folks ultimatums about cutting them off. Rather, I merely left it up to each individual to choose whether they could fulfill my explicit expectations for how I wanted to be treated moving forward. I made the decision not to prolong an already exciting evening as the dessert plates were cleared in awkward quiet. I got up from my chair and remarked I should go out. I have an early call tomorrow, I swear. Protests started right away and were expected. Even though we had been at the table for more than 2 hours, my mother persisted, but you just got here. My father went on, you can't leave now. We have a lot to talk about regarding your business endeavors. I said, another time, even though we both knew there was little chance that we would have that discussion on equal footing. I walked around the table and said each member of the family a courteous farewell. Within 15 minutes, the exchanges had changed from contemptuous to respectful, with multiple family members thrusting business cards into my grasp. I leaned down to give Eleanor Harper a genuine embrace when I got there. I said, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. That's not true, she said. You had good reason. However, I anticipate a formal visit soon, during which you will tell me everything. Make a commitment, I said. Tessa stepped forward timidly. When you mentioned perhaps interning, did you mean it? Yes, I reassured her. We can arrange something if you send me an email. Our high school program is excellent. Family members immediately found reasons to walk me out, which caused a frenzy of activity. While my mother proposed lunch dates with some fascinating friends who would love to meet you, my father tried to talk about possible investments. Chase hovered close by, holding a napkin on which he had written his company idea. My gathered relatives all took a collective breath when Marcus pulled my Corolla around, sandwiched between the Mercedes and the Porsche. They appeared to be physically hurt by the contrast between the modest car and their newfound awareness of my affluence. You truly choose to do this? Chase was compelled to inquire. It's trustworthy, I said plainly, giving Marcus a hefty tip. Marcus, I appreciate your assistance tonight. Additionally, remember to ask your daughter to email me that resume. Indeed, Miss Sloane. She will be overjoyed. My family was still standing in the driveway when I looked in the rearview mirror as I was leaving, a scene of bewilderment and rethinking. I started laughing aloud in the silent car as the tightness that had been building in my chest all evening finally subsided. I pulled over and contacted Delaney as soon as I could no longer see the house. All right, she responded right away. Did it succeed? Exactly, I affirmed. You had perfect timing. I've spent the entire night waiting by the phone. Tell me everything. What were they saying? What were they doing? Was Chase's face really as precious as we thought it would be? We both laughed at the family's obvious attempts to switch from condescension to networking in a matter of seconds as I went into great detail about the scene. I said, the private jet was a nice touch. However, I guess that in order to keep my credibility, I'll have to visit Tokyo. Delaney noted. Well, we have been discussing growing into the Asian market. One stone, two birds. It's true. Again, which parts were real? During your performance, I became sidetracked. The $50 million purchase price is exaggerated, but it is based on the talks with StreamTech. The funding for the education facility is correct, although it is $12 million rather than $15 million. Additionally, you haven't ordered a Tesla, but you might want to. That Corolla is indeed very old. I said, don't you start, even if it was cold. Delaney promised to begin creating the Tokyo schedule in the morning. as we continued our conversation for a few more minutes before hanging up. The truth of what had happened started to set in as I took the well-traveled path home. I had carefully kept my personal life, especially with my family, and my career achievement apart for 8 years. In a moment, that boundary had vanished. Both positive and negative effects would result. Decades of family dynamics have been flipped upside down. Expectations would change. They would restructure relationships. When I got home, I walked to my favorite window seat that looked out over the peaceful neighborhood, kicked off my shoes, and poured a cup of tea. Compared to my financial worth, my house was small, but it was cozy and, most importantly, it belonged to me. I had selected each component according to my personal preferences rather than what other people would find impressive. I felt a deep appreciation for the life I had created as I looked around at the bookcases brimming with well-read books, the pictures of friends going on hikes and kayaking excursions, and the artwork I had bought from local artists whose work spoke to me. It wasn't flawless. However, it was genuine. When I was younger, I frantically tried to win my parents' approval by bending myself into whatever position that might eventually win their acceptance. Walking away from that need had been a slow but powerful emancipation. It had included success, demonstrating to myself that I could prosper on my own terms. But realizing that their approbation was never the reward I had hoped for had given me a greater sense of independence. I couldn't help but feel sorry about the relationship I wanted we had, though. All children should have parents that accept and value their true selves. One of my most difficult life lessons has been to acknowledge that loss while continuing on. A text message from Miles buzzed through my phone. "How was the hellish family dinner?" Grinning, I typed back, "Exciting. They learned about the business." His answer was prompt. "Whoa. Willful. In a way. A long tale. Make a call tomorrow? Of course. I hope all is well with you. Regardless of whether you are a successful tech CEO or not, I think you're fantastic." His message gave me a sense of warmth that the rest of the evening spent with my family had not. This person respected what he saw and knew me, the true me beyond titles and money accounts. I opened my laptop and started a task I had been thinking about for months before going to bed. I established trust funds for Sterling Henry, Tessa, and Eleanor Harper, the relatives who, despite their apparent social standing, had truly given me kindness. They would never be in need of anything, but I would have to figure out how to give the gift to them without making them feel obligated or dependent. In addition, I wrote a draft email to my executive team proposing to allocate additional corporate funds to our social impact projects. If anything was reaffirmed tonight, it was the meaninglessness of wealth devoid of connection and purpose. At last, I opened a tab in my browser that led to a website for a car dealership. Perhaps the devoted Corolla should finally be retired. Not as a status symbol, but just as a recognition that change can occasionally be beneficial. I was drawn to a simple hybrid that was both comfy and useful. It seemed to strike the ideal balance. I felt lighter than I have in years when I shut down my laptop and got ready for bed. Maintaining the meticulously built barriers separating my worlds had been a drain. There would be difficulties as I moved forward with greater integration between my personal and professional lives, but there would also be relief. I would move through this new territory as I always had. Silently, calmly, and deliberately, according to my own terms, genuineness, direction, and the guts to define success according to my own standards. The 6 months went rather quickly as things changed and were adjusted. The trip to Tokyo had been both personally and professionally fruitful, giving me the opportunity to finalize our Asian market growth and process the significant change in my family's dynamics. I was faced with the task of readjusting almost all of my relationships after I returned. My small house was a hive of activity today as I got ready for a casual dinner party. In the Miley's neighborhood, I had just bought a somewhat bigger house that had more space for entertaining, but was still much below my means. The goal of the transfer had been to create a room that more accurately represented my entire self, rather than to upgrade. "Are you certain I can't be of any assistance?" Delaney leaned on the kitchen counter and asked. We had gradually grown closer beyond our working relationship after years of upholding professional boundaries. I checked the oven and reassured her that everything was under control. "The grill is being handled by Miles." I could see Sterling Henry and Miles talking through the patio doors while they worked on the vegetable and meat skewers. They seemed to be having a lively discussion, probably regarding funding for science education. 6 months after the Thanksgiving meal revelation, Miles had adapted to my financial situation with amazing ease. His sole requirement is that I occasionally allow him to cover the cost of dates in order to preserve his teacher dignity. Eleanor Harper was deep in conversation with Tessa, while seated in the coziest chair in the living room. Tessa was thriving in our company's high school internship program at the age of 17, demonstrating a natural talent for user experience design. Although she was unaware of it at the time, the trust fund I had set up for her would guarantee that she could enroll in any college of her choosing. That discussion would wait till she had gained acceptance based on her own qualifications. The family members who were unable to adapt to the new dynamic were conspicuously missing. In a number of unpleasant attempts to meddle in my business operations, my parents set up accidental meetings with prospective investors who were also longtime family friends. They fell back into cold civility when those attempts failed. Now we only spoke to each other on stilted, sporadic phone calls. It turns out that Chase's revolutionary company idea was actually a derivative app concept with dubious market viability. His excitement soon faded when I gave him candid criticism rather than investment. Even so, Margot Denise continued to occasionally text me articles about me, generally with a reminder that she had always supported my efforts. Delaney stepped forward to answer the doorbell. I remarked, "That's probably the Wongs." My neighbors, Calvin and Elise Wong, had become close friends and valued my gardening advice more than my business appraisal. I was surprised by how genuine the gathering seemed as the home grew in size. Everyone there was aware of my financial situation, but they were more interested in me as a person. Rather than acquisitions or status symbols, the discussions focused on concepts, experiences, and sincere interests. Eleanor Harper tapped her glass to get attention during supper. Her voice was still strong at 86 as she stated, "I'd like to propose a toast to Sloane," who reminded this elderly woman that genuine wealth isn't about possessions but about one's identity. As they raised their glasses, the table echoed, "To Sloane." I avoided the focus as a flush rose up my cheeks. "And to fresh starts in genuine relationships," I continued. Later, Tessa came over to me with her laptop when dessert was being served. "May I present you with something? I've been working on this project during my internship." "Naturally," I said, clearing a space next to me. She unlocked an app prototype that would pair underprivileged children with mentors in a variety of professions. "What you spoke about technology opening doors and opportunities was on my mind. What are your thoughts?" I genuinely said I think it's brilliant, feeling incredibly proud of her development. "Let's discuss resource allocation to properly build this out with the development team." Her expression brightened. "Really? You really believe it might launch? With the project being led by you?" "Of course." Miles discovered me loading the dishwasher in the kitchen as the evening was coming to an end and the guests were starting to leave. He put his arms around me from behind and said, "Good night." I leaned toward him and said, "Definitely better than my last family dinner." Speaking of family, he mentioned with a trace of anxiety, "Next month, my parents will be here. They would be delighted to meet you." I turned to him and said, "I'd like that." Miles smiled and replied, "Fair warning. They're straightforward folks. Dad was employed at the Miley's factory for 40 years. Mom worked as a nurse. The most luxurious property they have ever owned is their Florida retirement condo." Sincerely, I remarked, "They sound wonderful. Will they find it awkward to know about?" I made a hazy motion toward my current situation. Miles chuckled. "It's likely that Mom may inquire if you require assistance with your tax returns. Dad would want to ensure that your finances are diversified and that your car is kept appropriately. However, their main concern will be whether you bring happiness to their son." "And do I?" I inquired, feeling abruptly exposed. "More than I ever imagined possible," he said, giving me a gentle kiss. We were taking things gently, so after the last visitor had left and Miles had gone home, I sat on my back porch with the last glass of wine and thought back on the events of the previous 6 months. It hadn't been a straight line of mending. In order to identify and let go of the deeply rooted notion that I had to earn love through success, I had worked with a therapist to unravel decades of family indoctrination. Instead of relying on familial ties or childhood proximity, I had formed new friendships based on common interests and beliefs. With family members who still viewed me largely as a resource or a mirror of themselves, I had set more distinct boundaries. Above all, I had mastered the art of combining the various facets of who I am. The CEO who was successful, the faithful companion, The woman is still healing from childhood injuries. The partner realizing how vulnerable true intimacy is. I had compartmentalized these aspects of myself for years, presenting different personas in various settings. That performance's weariness had cost me more than I thought, until I let it go. My business has changed with me. As a leader, I would be more open about our goals and principles in order to draw in clients and team members who agreed with our idea that technology could be an equalizing force. By providing money for IT education in underprivileged communities nationwide, our foundation had broadened its scope of work. We had started a mentorship program to provide possibilities in the tech industry to young individuals from underprivileged backgrounds. At last, the Toyota Corolla was retired and sent to a community college automotive department, where students would restore it to gain maintenance skills. Miles's beloved Subaru was parked in the driveway with its replacement, a useful hybrid. Although neither car was intended to be impressive, they both consistently took us to important locations and events. I thought about the real meaning of success and prosperity as I watched the stars come out into the night sky. Freedom and opportunity were undoubtedly made possible by financial means. However, what is the true treasure? Has the guts to live a genuine life. To be recognized and loved for who you really are, not for what you own or do. The trip wasn't finished. I still occasionally caught myself reverting to my old habits of looking for approval through achievement. Moments of that old hostility still surfaced during family get-togethers. However, the way forward became more apparent with each genuine interaction and choice that was in line with my values rather than those of others. I learned that proving others wrong or right was not the path to true freedom. It wasn't in gaining wealth or recognition. It was in the freedom from relying on other people to prove your value. It was in the quiet assurance that comes from knowing oneself and living according to that understanding, no matter who knows. I was incredibly grateful as I thought back on the evening that had just ended, which was full of sincere laughing and conversation. This more integrated life had been prompted by the agonizing Thanksgiving realization. Before anything greater can be constructed, sometimes walls must be taken down. How do you assess your level of success? Does it lie in the things you amass? How do you come across to other people? Or anything more profound? Please share your ideas in the comments section below. Please like, subscribe, and share this story with anyone who might need a reminder that their value isn't based on what other people think. The problem with betrayal is that it creates something new while also shattering something. Sometimes taking a step back is a better course of action than retaliating. To put peace above performance. The ideal form of retaliation? Living a good life. Establishing limits. Quietly heal. Try making room for yourself if you're harboring anger. Let dignity speak for itself. I would be interested in hearing your tale if you have ever experienced betrayal from a loved one. Leave a remark below, your voice counts here, and you're not alone. And describe for me what it means to you to rise above.